this. Sorry about that, I forgot to update this. Not a big deal. Just give me an extra 15 seconds. All right. So welcome back, everyone. Hope we had a good weekend. Hope we had a productive weekend. I do believe I've gone through and updated everybody's quiz scores. Like I said, some of you typed in too specific of an answer. The way Canvas works is I have to type in every single possible answer that would be right. So if someone that puts like an extra period or an extra word or writes a sentence, I can't predict that kind of thing, which is why you would have gotten a 0. And now you probably got a 1 if the work and the answer was good. Some of you will feel like you had the right answer, and yet I did not give you a perfect grade, and that's because you didn't answer it as a, quote, QR student, as a quantitative reasoning student. And I believe I mentioned why that was. I don't want to put this in a recorded video because I, might use materials again or concepts again, and you never know what people will dig up on the internet. But again, I think everyone should understand why they got the grade they got. You can continue to email me if you think you have the right answer, but didn't. But I'll at least just say Bob he wasn't a young person, but I wouldn't say he was super old either. And that's all I'm going to say. All right, so your Mymathlab Homeworks 3.2 is due today. 3.3 is due on Thursday, and then 3.4, which we'll finish today in like, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes maybe. That'll be due in a week on the 27th. The next Excel is going to be 4.1, I believe, which is a budget. And it might say 4.2. I believe it has a 4.1 and a 4.2 in it because it's based on a section number, but it's the first Excel file or vice versa for the chapter. So the numbering gets a little confusing, but it'll be the one with budget. It'll be the one with a date assigned, but not yet. I don't want to give this date until we actually get into chapter 4. And I'm going to be giving you the project details today. I will tell you where you can find the file that we'll be looking at. It will be in Canvas, of course. And yeah, but before we get into the project details, let's go ahead and finish up 3.4 with the last bit we have to do, and that's on density. So we've done everything from chapter 3 except for density, and here we are. So density is a ratio. Oh my, a ratio? What is that? I've never seen a ratio before in my life. Well, that's just a bold-faced lie if you're in this class. Ratio, fraction. So density is a fraction. As I've said, everything from chapters 2, 3, and 4 on one level or another is some type of ratio. A lot of these ratios end up being proportions. We kind of extended the idea of proportions into things that we say we can't really do the fraction equals a fraction, but we can at least still relate them to each other. But another ratio, what is this the ratio of? It's not just apples to oranges, it's not students to teachers, it's specifically talking about an object's mass to its volume. Now, I want to kind of point out here that very often we'll actually use weight to volume. And you might be thinking, well, Mr. Beckner, weight and mass are the same thing. And that is not true, but it's also my point that most people feel like mass and weight are the same thing. Now, as long as we stay on planet Earth, your mass would have a direct correlation to your weight, and it would be consistent no matter what part of Earth you're on. But if we go to another planet, your mass would actually stay the same, but your weight would change because weight is affected by the gravitational constant of the planet you're on. For instance, Earth is 9.8 meters per second squared. Now you might go, meters per second squared, aren't things usually in meters per second? Good observation. Meters per second is a speed. Meters per second squared is an acceleration. So that gravitational force value, that constant of 9.8 meters per second squared, is not a speed, it's an acceleration. Now, we don't have to worry about what that means. That's not the point of this. I'm just trying to say that that number, that 9.8, if you go to the moon, it's lower. If you go to Mars, it's kind of in between Earth and the moon. If you went to Saturn, it would be much larger. If you were ridiculously close to the sun, it would be in the thousands or tens of thousands or millions, or I don't even honestly know, because I'm not trying to go stand too close to the sun. I'm not Icarus. So again, while your mass and your weight are technically two different values with two different types of units, and one of them is affected by the planet you're on, we kind of use them interchangeably. So when you're in England and you say, oh, I weigh 100 kilograms, that's a mass. But when you're in America and you say that I weigh 220 pounds, that's a weight. So the American system is a weight, but the non-American system, the thing that everybody else uses, is a mass. So that is the reason that I feel like most people find these two to be interchangeable. And you're probably not ever going to leave planet Earth in your lifetime. Notice I said probably. I can't make giant assumptions, but statistically it's probably true. So you're gonna be like, well, mass and weight are the same thing to me. In fact, one country uses mass and another country uses weight. So why aren't they interchangeable? So again, if you're gonna be in a science class, I would not be doing this, but in a QR class for just a concept of a ratio of something that measures your mass or weight to your volume, which is the amount of space you take up, or an object. It doesn't have to be you yourself. So that's just the ratio. So if they give you a measurement in feet or inches or miles, not cubic units like cubic feet, cubic inches, cubic miles, which is volume is always measured in, you're going to have to convert them. Now, this is pretty rare in most instances in the real world. If I give you some oddly shaped object, I would probably have to tell you what its volume is because you're not going to know the formula to find the volume of that shape. But in our class, I can say, oh, here's a cube or here's a box with these three dimensions, and then you could find the volume by just using an appropriate formula. So I will admit this is not super necessary unless you're going between cubic inches to cubic feet if they ask for a change like that. But I still want to remind us of the way we convert things that way. You can cube both sides of the conversion factor, or you can also just multiply by the same factor 3 times, as we saw in 3.1. So again, not really going to focus on this issue here, although you'll think we are because you see this thing just says 2 feet. It doesn't say 2 cubic feet. And that's because it's what I alluded to earlier. We're only measuring one side, and it is a cube. Okay. So let's get to the example. A box of supplies weighs 42 pounds. So we've got some box, and hold on, my pen's being weird. We got some box. We'll leave a little space for the actual problem. Here's our box. Now, I'm going to assume this is a cubic box because it says if the box has equal dimensions on all sides. Now, you might be like, Mr. Beckner, that doesn't look like a cube. Please ignore my poor artistic ability. It's a cube. So this box weighs 42 pounds in total. The whole thing is 42 pounds. So if you put that box on a scale, it comes out to 42 pounds exactly. Now this box has equal dimensions, and we get out our measuring tape and we measured one side to be 2 feet. So if you go from end to end, so again from here to here, that height would be 2 feet. Or you could go from end to end horizontally, and this width would be 2 feet from end to end. Or if you measured this distance right here, this distance would also be 2 feet. So it's 2 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet. And I know this doesn't look like 2 in comparison to this, and that's because we're looking at this box mostly from a forward perspective. So we're just barely peeking around the corner to see that it's an actual 3-dimensional shape here. All right, so the box has equal dimensions, and they say, what is the density of the box? And I say, note, you still need to convert your units, but it's not going to feel like a conversion problem. It's just going to feel like finding a volume. Because The density is the ratio of mass to volume or weight to volume. We're going to use weight. Again, this is not technically true, but good enough for a QR sake. So again, I said you have to convert your units, but that's just because we got to find the volume based on the fact that it's a 2 by 2 by 2 box. So the first thing we're going to do is find the volume, which is 2 feet times 2 feet times 2 feet. How do I know that? Because the volume of a cube is length times width times height. That is a geometric formula I do expect you to know. The volume of a box is length times width times height. I'm not going to ask you to memorize the volume of a sphere or a cone or a three-dimensional triangle or any kind of, or pyramid. I don't know why I said triangle. Pyramid. I'm not going to ask you to memorize any of those goofy shapes, but you do need to understand the basic concept of two-dimensional and three-dimensional shapes. Area for a rectangle is length times width. Volume for a box, length times width times height. Now check this out. The 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. And some person might say this is 8 feet, and it's wrong, because you have feet times feet times feet, which is feet cubed. It's like having 3 times 3 times 3 is 3 cubed, or x times x times x is x cubed. So that's it. There's our volume. So how do we find the density? The density is just the ratio of mass or weight, whichever you're given. Again, technically it's only mass, but in here we can use weight as we're about to do. So how do I know which way to divide them? Do I do weight divided by volume, or do I do volume divided by weight? The formula says the volume goes on the bottom. If you do these backwards, it's wrong. Volume must go on the bottom. So the 8 feet cubed, or 8 cubic feet, must go on the bottom. And the weight, which we said was 42 pounds, or the mass if we had it in, say, kilograms, was the 42 pounds. Again, like I said, it's very interesting because pounds is a weight, but kilograms is a mass. Your mass in kilograms is the same on the moon, is the same on Jupiter, is the same on Mars, is the same on Earth, but your weight in pounds would be different because they take into account the gravity. I know it's weird, just go with it. So we do 42 divided by 8, and let's see how, if we have to round it all. Spoilers, we won't. We get 5.25. So 5.25 is the answer, right? Maybe if we're not a quantitative reasoning student, no. As a quantitative reasoning student, that's wrong. 5.25 what? 5.25 oranges, 5.25 bobs, 5.25 oranges per bob? No, it's 5.2, that's an ugly 2, isn't it? 5 pounds per cubic foot. Or you could write with the word 5.25 lbs per cubic foot. Hello. That looks like a 2, but it's a 3. I had some gunk on my tablet, apparently. So there's our answer. Again, either of these is perfectly fine. Both mean the same thing, whether you write the units in fraction form or with a per form. So what does this mean? What is the point of this problem? What's the uniqueness of finding a density, or what's the reasoning to find a density? I don't know why I said uniqueness. Let's say this box was filled of just one object. It's filled with a bunch of marbles or something like that, or a bunch of sand, or I don't know, a bunch of very hollow beads, whatever. So this box is filled to the brim with the substance, and you go, well, I just hurt my back, so I don't really want to carry 42 pounds right now. But this is 2 by 2 by 2. What if I were to maybe slice this box? So I'm going to slice this box like so. Gotta be careful this way. So that each of these little red boxes is 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot. So again, this right here, each of these, oops, I got a little crazy on that one, didn't I? Just trying to emphasize, this little cube right here, which of course has, if you wanted to see through the cube, there's the whole thing. That's a 1 by 1 by 1, and there would be 8 of these. There's 1 here, 2, 3, 4 in the face, and then on the back side, there's 1, 2, and then 3, and then 4 behind it. So there would be 8 of these little 1 by 1s. 1 by 1 by 1. And each would have 5.25 pounds in it. That's what you can do with the concept of a density. You can break this down into smaller things. Now, do you have little 1 by 1 by 1 boxes? Because you certainly can't just take an open box and go from a 2 by 2 by 2 to a 1 by 1 to 8 of these 1 by 1 by 1s. You'd have to have 8 1 by 1 by 1 boxes. But again, let's say 42 pounds is too much for you to handle with your back and this, bigger, more awkward 2 by 2 by 2 box. So you go, all right, well, let me instead buy 8 smaller boxes, fill them up with this equally distributed object, and then you'll have 8 boxes with 5.25 pounds. And if you took 8 times 5.25, guess what you get? 42 pounds. That kind of goes in line with that concentration idea that whether you have 1 box with 42 pounds that's 2 by 2 by 2, or 8 boxes that are 1 by 1 by 1, 5.25 pounds in each, you still have the total amount of the thing at the end of the day. Now, if you're filling these boxes with DVDs and weights and water jugs and things that are not equally distributed, you'd have a much harder time doing this equally, but you could at least still say, let me go get 8 boxes and just try and put about 5 pounds in each, and then everything would be, again, much easier to carry on your poor old back or young back. Maybe you had an accident, I don't know, lifting too much weight at the gym from all that protein powder from a chapter ago. So densities of objects in the real world are not always equally distributed, like I said. If you have a box full of beads or sand or something like that, it's all the same thing and it's filled to the top, then that's an equal distribution of weight most likely. But if you've got a box with a 10-pound dumbbell in it and a calculator in it, you're not going to be able to equally distribute those weights if you try and put it in 2 boxes. 1 box with the 10-pound dumbbell and 1 with the, what did I say, a calculator, I think? Obviously, the calculator box is going to be lighter because those weights don't have the same densities. Think about it like a balloon versus a bowling ball. You could have a balloon the size of a bowling ball, but the bowling ball is a lot denser. The material inside of it is heavier. So even though they're the same size, they have different densities because their sizes, while the same, their weights or masses are different. So the bowling ball is denser, whereas that balloon is very, very, very not dense. All right. So with that said, that will close out chapter 3. So we've only got 1 chapter left for the midterm. So I'm just going to quickly remind you. Let me just put a new page. That's okay. Midterm will cover chapters 1 through 4. It will be exactly 1 week after finishing section 4.4. It will be 20 to 25 questions. Review will be provided in Mymathlab. The review will be much longer than the test. Somewhere in the ballpark of, I think, 60 questions is where I usually have my reviews. But what I do is, out of those 60 questions, most of the test problems will be from those problems, but with different numbers, and maybe 1 or 2 just have slightly different wordings. But conceptually, as a QR student, they are the same problem. So it says that I won't put everything from the review on the midterm. I couldn't do that. I can't give you a 60-question midterm and feel good about myself at the end of the day. But I also can't just give you a 20-question review that is exactly the same as the questions on the test with different numbers. That doesn't work for a quantitative reasoning student. Honestly, it doesn't work for most math students. It's too specific. But I feel like when we get in pre-calc and calc, you can kind of pull your punches in that way. But QR, we have to be a lot more open-minded. There's going to be a very, very, very short formula sheet provided only with conversions. This is not going to have anything like how to do rates or proportions or y equals kx, or any of those finance formulas like total interest is the interest per period times the number of periods, anything like that from chapter 1. So none of those are going to be up there, as I said when we went over them. Those were very, very basic ideas. A formula that is just one thing times another thing, or one thing divided by another thing, or added or subtracted. There's no reason to provide that on a formula sheet. It's a concept. Now, when we get into chapter 8 and 9, when we start seeing these big, goofy, crazy formulas, that's another story. I will provide those for you on formula sheets for the final exam. So that's all I want to say about that, except for the midterm will be available for 2 days only. It will not be taken during class time. We will still have regular class that day. So you'll be responsible in your own time to take the midterm. It'll be 90 minutes for your 20-25 questions. It'll be more than enough time. And then you will submit your work in Canvas in 15 minutes of completion. That is going to be extremely important. If you finish your if you finish your midterm in Mymathlab, and then I see that you turn in your work a day later, I'm going to give you a 0 on your midterm. If I see you turn in, sorry, I had some noise in the background. Where was I? If you turn in your midterm on Mymathlab and then you turn in the work 2 hours later, that's going to be a 0. You have got to get your work submitted to me within 15 minutes. You take a picture of it, you scan it, you upload it. That will be in Canvas. It will be very easy to find. I'll make sure it's the top thing to select. I'll have everything right with it, the good thing is y'all aren't my guinea pigs this time. Another class I actually had an issue with this, but I figured out what the issue was, so that won't be an issue for us. All right, so again, this will be after we finish chapter 4 sections of material, so probably 3 weeks, if I had to guess, is when our midterm will be. And I know that doesn't feel like a midterm since it's more like at the 3/4 point, but I did point that out at the very beginning of the semester that it takes us a lot more time to get through the first 4 chapters. Chapters 6, 8, and 9 are going to go by really, really quick at the end of the semester, because they have less sections. One of the chapter 8 we'll be able to knock out in a day, just the whole chapter in one day. That'll be it. But yeah, all right, let's not rant too much about that stuff. Let's get into the...
Mr. Beckner?
Yes.
I have a question. If you're like failing the class,
in the chat, I'm sorry, can you ask in the chat, please?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. There's a reason. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. All right, so the project, while that's going on, where are we? Here we go. So project 1, and when I say project 1, it's really just the project. I still like to just put the 1 there. Create a monthly budget. So I play with this each semester. I do some things differently. Some semesters I don't do a monthly budget as the project, but it is one of my favorite things to do. I am thinking about doing a small, I don't want to call it a second project. You know what, I'm not even going to talk about it today, but just know that there may be another Excel file that you will create from scratch, but it won't be a project. It might be like a substitute Excel homework. I'm still thinking about this, but it would be a longer concept than just like a regular Excel homework. But let's not worry about that for now. Let's focus on one thing. So each student is responsible for creating a monthly budget of all their expenses. Each student is responsible for creating a monthly budget of all their expenses, and you are going to be using Excel. So you have to use Excel. Yes, there are websites out there with pre-formatted budget things that are awesome to use, like mint.com and everydollar.com, I think. And those are great resources that I highly encourage you to use after this course is done. But we need to learn to build something from scratch, so we better appreciate it. And their budgets will be a lot more detailed and prettier and stuff like that. We're kind of doing a bare bones concept here. So you're going to make a budget for all your expenses for the month of November. If you do not spend any money regularly, you need to ask your parents or your spouse or whoever that you're residing with what they are spending on you each day. So I know as college students, you might not be really covering yourself right now. If this is your full-time job, or maybe you've just got you've got like some job where you're working 5-10 hours a week, you are clearly not paying for your lifestyle. You're not paying for your roof. You're probably not paying for most of your food, maybe not even your car insurance. If you're working 10 hours a week, you're barely covering, some food here and there, and maybe a date or two, something like that. So if you are under that scenario, then you have a couple of options. First, if you're living with your parents, spouse, whatever, then you can say, hey, Mom, hey, Bob, hey, Jane, whatever. Then I'll answer that question in a bit. You can say, hey, what are you spending on me? What's the rent of this home that we live in? And if you live with 3 people, you divide by 3. So let's say your home costs $1,500 a month and there are 3 people living there, then you could say your rent is $500, $1,500 divided by 3. It's a concept known as prorating, which I'll have typed up a little later. If your electric bill is $200 a month and there are 2 people living there, then you could say that your electric bill is $100, the amount that you have to cover, even though you technically aren't covering it. So I'm not asking you to show me how much is in your savings account. I'm not asking you to say, all right, I had $1,000 on November 1st, and then by December 1st, I had negative $20,000 or something like that, or positive $30,000 because you made some good investment. That's not what I need to see. I just want to see 1 month's worth of expenses and incomes. Again, it doesn't have to be a starting amount and ending amount based on your accounts. You can start at 0 and end it wherever you end. So if your parents or spouses or whoever you're living with don't wish to share their personal finance numbers with you, because some people hold this a little more privately than I think we really need to. I think that's something our society, I don't want to say looks down upon, but it's just something we don't like sharing. Kind of like some people don't like saying, who they're going to vote for. Some people don't like saying how much money they have in their account or how much debt they have. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that if we talked about this a little more openly, maybe some people would have, better positive budgets ultimately at the end of the day. Anyways, I'm not asking you to uproot someone's lifestyle if they don't want to tell you their numbers. Just make them up. Just make them up. Try and come up with an idea. Go online and find, what's average expenses for someone in a small city, or specifically in Portsmouth. You can find an average rent, average electric bills, average grocery expenses. You can find stuff like that. Or you can just completely make up the numbers. You can say, oh, my rent's $1,500 a month and my food expenses is $2,000 a month because I eat creme brulee for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I don't know. Okay. So even if you are covering your own expenses, you're a full-fledged, quote, adult, and this is your side gig going to TCC for classes, or you're working full-time and student full-time and you just never sleep. If you don't want to share your numbers with me, you don't have to. You can make up your own numbers no matter what. But what I would suggest is, if you are making up your own numbers, but you have your own numbers, you just didn't want to share with me, keep a file with your actual numbers for yourself. This assignment is in no way, shape, or form about me. This is for you. I'm doing an assignment for you. So again, if you don't trust me with your numbers for some reason, which by the way, I open these blind. So I basically have someone else open the files for me. I write down a grade based on numbers, and then after the fact, I go and then correlate the numbers to the student name. So I don't even remember who did what by the end of it after I've graded 40 of these. So again, I am not here to be nosy. I'm not here to research your own personal budget or anything. But even after I said that I'm doing all this blind, if you just have no trust in me, then make up your own numbers, because I'm not grading the numbers. That's not what I'm grading. What I'm grading is, did you set up your rows and columns appropriately? Did you make enough expenses? Did you make an analysis? Did you make a chart? Did you have these totals, all these different things? Again, I'll be looking for all the numbers in the formulas to be right based on what you have. But I'm not going, oh, well, Bob spent $50 on food. He gets a D. Jane spent $10 on food. She gets an A. That's not what I'm doing here. I don't care what the numbers are. I care that you set up an Excel file with formulas and labeling and charts and analysis accurately. So I hope that that is understood. How should this be set up? And that was a typo from the summer. Not typo, but just I missed it when I was editing the file. Your rows should be the days of November. Now remember, rows are horizontal, so row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, row 5. If you make the columns your days, this thing is going to take up way, way more space than it should. So that's why the rows should be the days of November. Now don't just write 1, 2, 3, 4. It's got to be November 1st, November 2nd, or 11/1, 11/2. I don't want to type all 30 of those. You don't. We've discussed ways that Excel can kind of make that happen quicker. Your columns should be your different categories. So your different expense categories. So you'll have a column for maybe your rent, a column for how much you're spending on gas each day, a column for car insurance, a column for repairs on your home, a column for health and beauty supplies, a column for fast food and restaurants, a column for pet supplies, a column for clothes, a column for, the list and possibilities go on. You could have 100 different columns for a budget or more if you expend a lot of money on a lot of different things. Now, I'm not looking for anyone to have a specific number of categories. It's not you have to have 15, you need to have 17, you need to have 35. What I've said is you need a minimum of 6 categories. So once again, if you find that you don't spend money on at least 6 different things, just make something up for the assignment. And again, you can have your own file that you don't submit to me that only has the 3 or 4 categories, but trust me, eventually you are going to have 7, 8, 9, 30 different categories of expenses. Now, a lot of expenses you can have a much more specific approach, like you can have a column for fast food, a column for restaurant food, a column for groceries, or you could just have one column for food. Me personally, I like to have a column for groceries and then a column for dining out. So I'd lump fast food and fancy restaurants all in the same column personally. But again, if you want to separate them into 3 or just in 1, that's up to you. So in the interest of not making this thing gigantic, if you do end up having more than 19, 20 categories of expenses, just make your last one miscellaneous, the far right expense. And then just anything that doesn't go to an attribute of the first 19, just throw it in there. And you can make a little note to the side of that. Yes, I did say at least 6 categories right here, minimum 6 categories. So again, you can squish some categories together. You can have them more specific. It's up to you. I don't care how you set this up as long as you have at least 6 categories. If you have more than 19, call the 20th one miscellaneous. So, your office supply budgets, it could be under miscellaneous. Your gym membership might be under miscellaneous. Your I don't know, your lawnmower repair could be under miscellaneous. Again, only if you had 19 other categories already that just those 3 things didn't really fit into. And again, you could just make a note to the far side over there if you really want to keep track of a miscellaneous expense. You say, oh, well, this was on lawnmower repair. Oh, this one was on gutter repair. This one was on, I don't even remember the other things I said. Okay. If your expenses vary wildly from month to month, consider every possible expense you have. Things like car insurance, taxes, doctor's visits, prescriptions, house and car repairs. They may only be done like every 3 months, or maybe once a year, maybe once every 5 years. So I'm going to say that you must account for these as a monthly expense. So let's say you just have noticed every year you spend $1,200 on your house on repairs. But maybe that $1,200 just comes in big lumps. Maybe you spend $900 in January, $300 in March, and then you don't spend anything again until January, just typically. Well, if you're budgeting in November and this $900, $300 expense doesn't show up, if you're going to use this as a basis for your average monthly budget, which is kind of the point of this whole thing. So maybe when you look at your expenses in November, you say, oh, I've spent $1,000. So I expect every month I'm going to spend about $1,000. But then January rolls around and you end up spending $1,900 because you have this $900 home repair. And you go, well, this sucks. I only had $1,000 in my savings and checking because I know every month I'm spending about $1,000. So, well, shoot, what do? I got to put $900 on a credit card, or I got to finance this or whatever. This is the point of what I call prorating expenses. Prorating expenses. Your house, if you own a home, is going to bite you hard maybe every 6 months, every 2 years, every 10 years. Something bad's going to happen, and you're going to spend thousands of dollars. So you need a little safety net in your average monthly budget. Again, the whole point of this, not to just have a budget of specifically November, but to have a bit bigger idea. Yes, this file will be in Canvas, as I said earlier. So like I said, these bigger expenses that only come up occasionally and maybe unpredictably, it's nice to have some padding in our savings accounts and go, okay, well, let's see, I tend to spend $1,200 a year, which means that's about $100 a month. I might not spend $100 in January, $100 in February, $100 in March, $100 in November, $100 in December. It might just be big expense comes up all at once. So what you do is every month you take $100 and you tuck it away under your mattress and your savings account. And you pretend it's not there. And then the next month, February comes up, $100 stored away. March, $100. And eventually you've got $9 or $10 or $11 or $1,200 stored away. And then this $900 expense comes up and you go, sweet, I've been planning for this. So I know this $900 was for home expenses. So I take it out of my savings. I pay for my window repair or whatever it might be. And now I'm not in debt. This is something that I would say 9 out of 10 Americans do not understand, or might understand, but just don't apply. Because 9 out of 10 Americans have finance problems. And if I have one goal in my life besides teaching math, it's to help people understand their financial issues just a little better without being nosy, and how that maybe they can correct some habits or learn some better habits to push them in the right direction, into the green instead of the red. And again, I'm also of the mindset that everybody is allowed to do whatever the heck they want. So if you learn this stuff and then don't apply it, that's your prerogative. I'm not going to judge you. That's not my job. You are your own being. But this is something that I honestly apply in my life. I've had very, very large expenses on my home at several points. I put a new roof on my home. That is thousands upon thousands of dollars. And thankfully, I understand the concept of prorating expenses ahead of time, and I put $100 here, $100 there, and didn't really have to finance much of it. So that was very convenient. And you might say, well, I just don't have the ability to put this money away, due to my living situation, and maybe try and work towards being able to. But yes, I do understand that some of us just get stuck in a downward spiral, and it's tough to get out of that, in which case I don't have much advice past this, except just do everything you can to curb your expenses if you would like to get out of that spiral. Find ways to cut your expenses, which is another case of this whole thing. A lot of us will go to fast food every single day and spend $5 to $10 on every meal. If you go out to fast food twice a day and you spend $10 on each meal, that's $20. And then you're doing that every day. That's 30 days times $20. That's $600 over a month that you're just spending on fast food. Whereas you might have been able to go to the grocery store and cooked up similar things, a little more time invested on your end, which again, maybe you don't have the time. But if you do, then you could go to the grocery store, spend $200 maybe, whip up all these things on your own, and then take that $400 and put it in a savings and checking account, and you'll be on your way to a new roof before you know it. So again, if you find that you have widely varied expenses, this is a really good thing to try. Now, I have said, I always fight my students over this. No one ever wants to do this. When I first started doing these budgets, no one did it at all. And then I started making this a two-part project where I just gave students their own numbers. I made them numbers. I was like, all right, here's your quarterly expenses. Here's your semi-annually expenses. Here's your annually expenses. And now turn these all into monthly expenses to at least get the idea of prorating. But it just seems a little too vague when I did that. So here's what my requirement is for this. And this is a must. It's all caps. And notice it says 20 points. This is worth 20 points. If you don't prorate at least one expense in your budget, so you're going to need to note somewhere that this was a prorated expense, I will take 20 points. That's 2 full letter grades off of your project. So again, if you don't have some type of expense that you need to prorate, make it up. Just make it up. So yes, projects worth 100 points. Standard 100-point scale. So again, the categories I list are not the only categories you can have. Please come up with whatever is relative to your life. Make up what you have to, go with what you have, whatever. Another thing, vehicle property taxes. They come in annually, $240 a year for a vehicle property tax. That's probably like a, I don't know, $10,000 to $15,000 car, so a pretty new sedan, new-ish at least. So you go, oh man, my bill just came in and it's $240 and I only have $60 in my checking account. Well, next year, you go, I know this $240 bill is coming in the mail in June or September or whatever month it happens to be. I don't remember off the top of my head. So you go, all right, in January, I'm going to put 20 bucks aside. In February, I'm going to put 20 bucks aside. In March, I'm going to put 40 bucks aside. So that way, when your bill comes in the mail, you've got your 240 bucks already stashed. And there you go. Your vehicle tax is paid for. If you own your own home, your property taxes come in, at least for some cities, not all cities, quarterly. So every 3 months. And a lot of people will go, well, man, I got this $750 property tax bill. This didn't happen in January or February. Where am I going to come up with the $750? Well, first of all, if you own your own home, you don't have a mortgage, and that's $1,000 a month you're not paying probably. So that's kind of terrifying that you can't handle that. Or your homeowner's insurance comes in once per year when you own your own house. If you don't have I just lost the name, escrow. If you don't have an escrow with your mortgage backer. Sorry, that term was like escaping me. I was like, E something. So again, we all generally have expenses that pop up randomly. Oh, shoot, my car just broke down. I blew the timing belt, $1,000. That's not going to happen every month. That's going to happen once every 5, 6, 7 years. Hopefully never, but hopefully it's 100,000 miles and it's time to change the timing belt, timing chain, but that's still going to be that $1,000 expense. If it breaks, you might take out a couple other things and now it's a $1,500 expense. So you go, oh, okay, well, that's going to happen every 5 years, so let's put 10 or 20 bucks a month aside to build up to that. All right, so you got your Excel file, you got your rows, which are your days of November. You've got your columns, which are your categories. The very last row, so under November 30th, should be the sum of each category. So that way you can see the total you spent on your food, the total you spent on your health expenses, the total you spent on your dog, the total you spent on whatever. So then you can see, okay, well, my $5 at Chick-fil-A, then my $7 at Chick-fil-A, then my $14 at Taco Bell. I don't even know how you spend $14 at Taco Bell. Everything's so cheap there. Well, not anymore, I guess. I don't eat Taco Bell. So you can see, oh, man, my fast food category was $600. That's significant. Let's hit the grocery store, maybe. So once you have your sum of each category, you will create a pie chart that includes every expense category. Not the sum of the daily expenses. Not the sum of the daily expenses. It's a pie chart that includes every expense category using these totals. So what these totals from number 4. So the pie chart for part 5 is based on part 4. It's not based on the daily sum. It's based on the sum of the categories across all 30 days. So when you make your pie chart, it should be seen as a percentage. Remember, pie charts, the point of them is to label them as percentages. So make sure your chart is well labeled. If your chart just says, oh, category 1 was 5%, category 2 was 13%, that's not well labeled. It needs to say food expenses was 5%, dog expenses was 13%. It needs to be well labeled. If anything is missing, those are points off. Last but not least, make an analysis of your monthly expenses. Are you spending too much on fast food, Starbucks, whatever? Could you put some extra money into a savings account, CD, mutual funds, stocks each month? If you consider your monthly income, did you spend more than you earned or did you spend less? This can be placed anywhere in the Excel file. Now, when I say anywhere, don't put it 5,000 columns to the right or 10,000 rows below. Put it within the main scene. So what are the three main things I'm looking for? I'm looking for a big old chart with the days of November, categories, a sum of each day, a sum of each category. I want a pie chart based on the sum of each category with labels. I want just a sentence or a paragraph somewhere that is analysis. And you can put that all in one cell. You don't have to type in a whole bunch of cells. You can type your entire analysis in one single cell. This will be submitted in Canvas. This file right here will be available in Canvas. In fact, I'll show you essentially what it'll look like, but again, not exactly. Can I do this? How am I on time? Okay, so far. That was weird. Let's just go to one of my QR classes. So you got your lectures, your quiz stuff, old lecture videos, some of these things you can't see, reviews. So actually, the midterm review is actually going to be under here. You can see the file that I've already got set up, but I don't have reviews available to you yet. So spoilers, that's there. Projects. So you can see I have this little, X'd out symbol. If I click it, then you can see it, which it automatically makes everything displayed, which is weird. So I unclicked it, so you still can't see it right now. This will be available by tomorrow because none of these are, you can see that says summer 20. Some of these are just old slight variations on what I have for you. So those files are not what you're going to have. But then there'll be this that says submit the project here. That's where you'll submit it. So this will be the file where it'll be your monthly budget under the projects tab. And then eventually, once you have it completed, you'll submit it there as well. I'm going to highlight something that someone just asked about that I'm not going to say out loud since I've said it several times already. Now, please note that this is for all the different days of November, and your project is due December 1st. So you're going, Mr. Beckner, you're mean, you're evil, you're awful. How am I supposed to turn this into you the day after I can even put this thing together? Because I'm not mean and evil and whatever the other word I said, because you can work on this all month long. Start building the file right now. You can go ahead and build the rows and you can start kind of predicting some of your expenses. But let's say November 3rd comes up and it's your first expense, you spend $30 in fuel. So on November 3rd, you open your Excel file and you put your $30 in the appropriate column. You make a column for gasoline or fuel or whatever what you want to call it. And then November 5th comes around and you spent 20 bucks at Chick-fil-A or something like that. And you make your fast food column, and on the November 5th spot, you put your, what did I say, $30 for Chick-fil-A. You need to be working on this every single day of November that you're making expenses at least, but this is something you should be continually working on. Do not wait till the last second to do this. And you want to know what the number one problem with students in this project? They wait till the last second to do this and they go, oh, I can't finish this in a day. How are you so mean? Again, you can build this entire thing and you can just put in some fake numbers as placeholders. You might not predict the number of columns you need. That's the only little squirrely part. But then you can go ahead and figure out how to make your pie chart based on your fake numbers with the days already in place. the analysis you'll be able to make in 30 seconds. I mean, you'll figure out what's happening as the month progresses. Oh, I'm already seeing that I'm spending too much on whatever thing, or I could spend a little less here, a little more there, whatever it might be. You are certainly allowed to have days with no expenses. Some of you are only going to have 5 or 6 expenses the whole month, and that's fine. Like I said, I need at least 6 categories. If you don't have 6 different categories that you spend on in a month, you just have to make something up for me, okay? Like I said, you can have your own file with only 3 or 4 categories, but trust me, as you age, as you start having a career and more problems, you're going to start spending on more things. You'll be like, man, I could put 30 or 40 categories. I got 3 expenses every day. I got 5 expenses every day. But yes, I don't spend money every day. So in my little budget, that I have one that looks just like this because I'm not a hypocrite. I like to apply things that I teach. So I have plenty of days where I don't have expenses. And then I've got plenty of days where I've got 5 or 6 or 7 expenses. I'm still here, don't worry. I know this is a lot to process all at once. That's why I'm trying to take a long time, and you keep asking questions in chat. I highly encourage that. I like to spend a long time talking about this project because I know there's plenty of questions. I'm asking for lots of specifics. Again, this document will be in Canvas no later than tomorrow at, let's say, 3 o'clock. I'm going to try and have it uploaded today, but I have a million things on my plate, so I just might not have time. So minimum of 6 categories. Rows are the days of November. Columns are the categories. If you have your rows and columns swapped, I will take massive points from you. Not like 30 or 40 points, but you will have some points taken from you. Make sure that you're adding up the total for the days. So the far right column should be the total daily expense, just so you have an idea of what you're spending each day. Then at the very bottom, you have the sum of your total expenses. And then you can also have a sum of all the daily expenses. So the far right column, if you have the expenses each day, you can just add those all up and you got your sum of your days. Do not just type numbers for the sum of the categories or the sum of the daily expenses. You have to use Excel formulas. You have to use Excel formulas. You have to use Excel formulas. Now, do not, and this is not something that's going to be in the file. I'm only going to say this and you'll see it on the screen, but this will not be in the file. Do not have different Excel formulas typed for different rows or columns. So in other words, the formula you have for the sum of November 3rd's expense should be the same formula you have for November 4th, should be the same formula you have for November 5th. You should only have to type that formula one single time for November 1st, and then you fill it down. This is a very classic mistake that my students make, is they'll just say, oh, I have an expense in gasoline and in fast food on November 1st, so let me just add those 2 things up. No, you add up all the blanks even though they're blank. So you need to add that entire row. Or for your expenses, you might say, well, I only had 1 or 2 expenses, so let me just add up this cell plus this cell. No, you have to add up the entire column, because this point is not just to have your expenses for November. You can then make a copy of this and have it for December, or add another tab and just copy the file over in that single Excel file and have your December expenses. And when you get to December, your expenses are not going to be on exactly the same category for exactly the same day. So you don't want to have to go and manually type, oh, this cell plus this cell plus this cell. You want that formula to already be there for you. So all you're doing is punching in numbers. All right, I spent 50 bucks here, 25 bucks there, 16 bucks there. And Excel is doing every single bit of the processing for you. So that way it's efficient. So again, it's all about fill formulas. That is one of the things I check extensively. And I take off points, significant points, if you don't do that correctly. Because you're supposed to be building a budget not just for November, something that you can then use in December, you can then use in January. You go, well, wait a minute, the other months have an extra row. Okay, well, make 31 rows when you copy the file for January. You just bump everything down a row. That's not time consuming. It's an easy fix. And then once you have one with 31, you're good for all of them, right? So again, yes, there are pre-formatted things for this on the internet. Do not use them. You are supposed to start from scratch. Start these from scratch. You're not supposed to take some other file from the internet and just kind of put your own stuff into that. I will absolutely know if you do, because it will look drastically different than what I'm asking for. I'm asking for a very simple formatted project here. All right, so someone asked about the midterm earlier, and what I had said was the midterm is going to be in about 3 weeks. I'm not saying exactly. I don't want to say any particular date, but if the midterm was 3 weeks from today, that means it would be the 10th and 11th. Those would be the 2 days you had. Again, I am not saying any dates for the midterm. I'm just giving you a ballpark, because it's probably going to take us 3 classes to go through chapter 4. So that's about where I expect it to be, roughly 3 weeks from now for the midterm. All right. But we will talk about the midterm stuff a little bit more later. I will not give any examples for what the project should look like. I have detailed pretty accurately as to how it should be built. You can certainly go online and you might be able to find something that looks like this to give you a better idea. But again, it's not going to be exactly the same. So again, this is supposed to be built from scratch. No examples will be given for this. Do not overthink this. I have told you exactly what to do if you pay attention and you follow instructions. The only thing you have to figure out is what formula do I type in here where I'm summing up the day? What formula do I type in here where I'm summing up the month? And I would never give any examples for that, because we've taught you Excel in here. You're supposed to know, all right, well, you know, use the sum and do this and that, and boom, there you go. I've told you the things not to do in this. So if you're looking, as you're building this, if you're stuck, come back to this video on YouTube, and hopefully I will have said something that'll push you in the right direction. But again, I do feel like these instructions are pretty well detailed. Furthest right column is the sum of the daily expenses. The bottom row, where is it? Here it is. Your last row should be the sum of each category. So that means the very far right entry would be the sum of the daily expenses, which would give you the sum of everything you spent all month long. So again, that's something you could use towards your analysis. So if you look at the sum of all daily expenses and it's $2,000, if you made $2,500 that month net, then you could say, oh, I was able to put $500 into a savings account. Or, you know, for maybe future expenses or for investing, whatever. Or maybe your expenses are $2,000 a month, but you only had $1,500 come in. And then you go, ooh, I spent less, I spent more than what I have as an income. So maybe I need to be a little more careful. Again, the analysis part is up to you. I'm okay with just about any type of financial analysis you do. I'm not looking for some super deep analysis with statistics and chi-square distributions and blah, blah, blah. I'm just looking for you to say, I could spend less on this category, or I need to curb my total monthly expenses because it was more than my monthly income. And you know, maybe there's a reason. If you're in school, maybe you're just building up some debt that you're hopefully going to have a $100,000 a year job later, and you'll wipe away the debt clean in a year or two. You know, people like lawyers and doctors, they acquire tons of debt in college, generally speaking, but then they get really high paying jobs, hopefully, that's able to wipe away the debt. You don't want to have $100,000 worth of debt and then go get a liberal arts job making $25,000 a year. That doesn't really work well together. In general, again, I'm not telling anybody how to live their life. I'm just saying, in terms of finance numbers and staying in the green, if you're going to acquire a lot of debt for your college, you want to try and get a job that's going to balance that out so you can get rid of your college debt within 10 years, hopefully. Now, again, can most people do that? Questionable, but I hope I can at least positively affect 20 to 40 people each semester and maybe give them some inspiration in the long run to stay in the green. All right, so We've got 10 minutes left. I don't know that I really want to get into chapter 4 with only 10 minutes left. So let's go ahead and call it an early day. I know I don't really do that very often, but like I said, it's only 10 minutes left. I'll hang out for a couple more minutes if you have any more questions with the project or just the subtle midterm details we've gone over so far. But again, this file will be in Canvas by 3 p.m. tomorrow. Actually, since I'm finishing early, I can put it in right now. That's what I'm gonna do. Cool. Again, if you have any questions, you can email me. You can ask right now in chat. All right, so final reminder of, not that, this, of what's coming up and due. Yes, good, that was perfectly timed question. Mymathlab 3.2 is due today. 3.3 is going to be due on the 22nd, 3.4 the 27th, since we finished 3.4 today. Your next Excel file is going to be 4.1 or 4.2, depending on just where you're looking at it. That date, let's see, since we're going to start 4.1 on the 22nd, we'll have it due on the 29th. Not 429, do 1029. The project details are today, and I might have a quiz Thursday, question mark. I'll probably have a quiz for Thursday. I think that's good. So go ahead and read over the notes to share from 4.1 to prepared for next class. Check out the textbook. Remember, you're still supposed to be reading ahead, still supposed to be putting in 6 hours a week minimum in addition to the lecture time for homework, whether it's Excel, regular quizzes, discussion boards, or just reading ahead. If you need more than 6 hours, then put more than 6 hours. It's up to you. All right. I hope this was informative. I hope that I laid out the project concept well enough. But again, please don't overthink this. It is quite simple in how you're supposed to lay this out. I'm not looking for a whole bunch of different colors. You can certainly color it if you want. I'm not looking for the cells to be shaded in any particular way. You can do whatever you want in terms of making it prettier. That's not what I'm looking for in terms of grading. In terms of grading, I'm looking for accurate information, good Excel formulas in use, pie charts that are well labeled, and an analysis. You can give me fake numbers. I do not care. But if you're giving me fake numbers, have your own numbers in your own file at home for your own sake. Again, this project is about you. I don't care if you're spending $2 a month or $20,000 a month. That's not part of your grade. All right, so on that bombshell, have a good day. We'll see you on Thursday, ready to dive headfirst into chapter 4. Again, email me if you have any questions. Take care, everybody.